In a mansion filled with luxurious silence, a contract was signed without love. During a candlelit dinner, a secret from the past was revealed. At the altar, a kiss that wasn't in the terms changed everything. And when a hidden clause threatened an innocent life, love had to face guns, lies, and brutal truths. Before diving into this gripping story of power, passion, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more breathtaking tales. Among ancient shelves and the subtle scent of aged paper, her fingers moved precisely over the spines, seeking order amid chaos. Emily Parker always found refuge among the books in the Boston Municipal Library. It was there, in the reverent silence of dusty corridors, that she felt truly safe. Her modest librarian's salary barely covered basic necessities, but she would never trade this sanctuary for any other job. That Tuesday morning, while organizing a biography section that had been jumbled by careless students, Emily heard something unusual, the sound of rhythmic footsteps echoing down the main corridor. They weren't the hurried steps of late university students, nor the tired shuffling of retirees coming to read newspapers. These were confident, assured steps that seemed to know exactly their destination. The air suddenly grew thicker when he appeared at the entrance to the section where she worked. Tall, wearing an impeccable suit that certainly cost more than her annual salary. The man observed her with an intensity that made her feel like a book being leafed through page by page. His dark eyes seemed to decipher secrets she didn't even know she possessed. Emily Parker. His voice was deep, controlled, unhurried. She nodded, instinctively smoothing her simple dress. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you with something?" Stepped forward, and Emily could smell the subtle but expensive cologne emanating from him. "My name is Alexander Hamilton. I need to speak with you about a proposition." The surname made her swallow hard. Hamilton, even someone living in the simple world of bookshelves knew that name. The family controlled one of the country's largest business conglomerates, with interests ranging from communications to renewable energy. Alexander Hamilton was known not only for his fortune, but also for his reputation for coldness in business and the hermetic personal life he maintained away from the spotlight. "A proposition?" Emily repeated, confused. "Sir, I think there must be some mistake. I work here at the library. I don't have anything that could interest someone like you." An almost imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Believe me, Miss Parker, you have exactly what I need." Alexander looked around the nearly empty library, then fixed his eyes on her again. "This isn't the appropriate place for our conversation. I'd like you to join me for lunch." Emily felt her heart race. I can't leave during working hours, and frankly, Mr. Hamilton, I don't understand what a man like you wants with me." "1 hour for lunch, that's all I ask." Alexander took a card from his jacket's inner pocket and held it out to her. "If after what I have to tell you, you decide you're not interested, I'll disappear from your life and never bother you again." Emily took the card with trembling fingers. The paper was thick, superior quality, with only his name and a phone number embossed in gold relief. "I really don't understand." "You will." Alexander checked his watch, a model Emily recognized. From luxury magazines, she occasionally browsed in the periodicals section. "It's 11:30. May I pick you up at noon?" The proposal was absurd. Emily didn't know this man, had no idea what he wanted, and everything about the situation screamed danger. But there was something in his eyes, not exactly vulnerability, but a contained urgency that intrigued her. "All right," she heard herself say, surprised by her response, "but just 1 hour." Alexander nodded. 1 hour will be sufficient." He turned to leave, but stopped at the section entrance. "Miss Parker, I hope you understand that our conversation must remain confidential, regardless of your final decision." After he left, Emily stood motionless between the shelves, still holding the card. Her hands trembled slightly, and she wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life or was about to discover something that would change everything. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Emily tried to focus on work, but her thoughts constantly returned to the scheduled meeting. At 11:55, she was at the library entrance, nervous and questioning her sanity. The car that stopped in front was discreet, but she immediately recognized the subtle elegance that only true money could buy. Alexander stepped out and opened the passenger door for her, a gesture that seemed as natural as breathing. The chosen restaurant was on the top floor of a five-star hotel in the city center. Emily had never been to such a place, where waiters wore white gloves and the menu prices had no decimal points because they were too high to need them. Alexander ordered for both of them, choosing dishes she didn't even know how to pronounce. While they waited, he observed her with that same disturbing intensity as before. "Do you live alone?" he asked, getting straight to the point. Emily tensed. "Why do you want to know?" "Because my proposal requires certain changes to your current life." "What kind of proposal is this, Mr. Hamilton?" Alexander interlaced his fingers on the table. "I need a wife." Emily almost choked on the water she was drinking. "Excuse me?" "Not a wife in the traditional sense," he continued, unperturbed. "A contractual wife, for a specified period, with specific terms and adequate compensation." Emily felt the world spin around her. "You're proposing a fake marriage?" Proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement." Alexander took a thick envelope from his jacket's inner pocket. "All the terms are in here. The period would be 2 years. During that time, you would live in my residence, attend social events as my wife, and maintain the appearance of a real marriage for the public." Emily was speechless. "And in return?" $10,000 per month, plus all expenses paid. Clothes, hairdresser, car, everything necessary to maintain the role. At the end of the contract, a $50,000 bonus. The amount was impossible. Emily earned $2,000 a month at the library. What Alexander was offering represented a fortune that would change not only her life, but also— "Why me?" she asked, still trying to process the information. Alexander hesitated for the first time since they'd met. "You have the necessary profile, educated but not belonging to the same social circle, beautiful but in a discreet way, and mainly, someone who can disappear from public life after the contract ends without leaving complicated traces." Emily felt simultaneously flattered and insulted. "And why do you need a fake wife?" "That's not relevant to our transaction." "It's relevant to me." Alexander studied her for a long moment. "Let's say that certain family and business pressures make it convenient for me to appear publicly as a committed and stable man." Emily looked at the envelope on the table. 2 hours ago, her biggest concern was organizing a biography section. Now she was being invited to live a completely different life, for money she had never dreamed of possessing. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course." Alexander checked his watch again. "You have until tomorrow at 8 in the morning." That's not much time for such an important decision. "Miss Parker," Alexander leaned slightly forward, "people like me don't have the luxury of slow decisions. If the answer is no, I need to find another candidate quickly." Emily picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of the documents inside. "And if I accept?" "Then your life will change completely starting tomorrow." When Alexander dropped her back at the library, Emily was still in shock. She put the envelope in her purse, trying to act normally for the rest of the day. But she knew nothing would ever be normal in her life again. That night, alone in her small apartment, Emily opened the envelope and read every line of the contract. It was detailed, specific, and absolutely real. Alexander Hamilton was offering her a life that seemed straight out of a fairy tale, but what price would this transformation exact from her soul? As the hours passed and the decision approached, Emily knew she was about to cross a line from which she might never return. But there was something Alexander didn't know, something that made his offer not just tempting, but absolutely necessary. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m., interrupting her anguished thoughts. On the other end of the line, a weak but familiar voice whispered her name, and Emily knew her decision was already made. She would sign the contract, but not for the reasons Alexander imagined. Emily woke the next morning with swollen eyes and certainty weighing on her chest like a stone. The call the night before had lasted only 3 minutes, but it was enough to confirm what she already knew. There was no real choice to be made. "Emily, sorry to call so late." The voice of Sarah, her younger sister, sounded weak and tired. "The doctor said I need to start the new treatment next week. It's expensive, Em. Very expensive." Sarah was only 22 years old and was fighting a rare disease that attacked her immune system. The medical costs had already consumed the family's savings, and the experimental treatment that could save her life cost a fortune that Emily could never gather with her librarian's salary. Now, looking at the contract spread on the table of her small apartment, Emily knew that Alexander Hamilton had appeared in her life as an answer to her most desperate prayers. The money offered would be more than enough to cover all of Sarah's treatments and still ensure a secure future for both of them. At 7:30 a.m., Emily called the number on the card Alexander had given her. "Mr. Hamilton, this is Emily Parker. I accept your proposal." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure, Miss Parker?" "Absolutely." "Good. A car will come to pick you up at 9 o'clock. Bring only the essentials. Underwear and some personal items of sentimental value. Everything else will be provided." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. The reality of the situation was beginning to materialize. "Where are we going?" "To your new home." The car that arrived at 9 o'clock sharp was different from the previous one. Larger, more luxurious, with dark windows that prevented anyone from seeing who was inside. The driver, a middle-aged man with a professional appearance, greeted her politely and carried her single suitcase. During the journey through the city, Emily observed how the neighborhoods gradually changed. They left the outskirts where she lived, passed through the commercial center, traversed middle-class residential areas, until they reached Beacon Hill, Boston's most elegant neighborhood. The Hamilton mansion was impressive, a neoclassical palace surrounded by perfectly maintained gardens and high walls that ensured absolute privacy. Emily felt tiny when the electronic gate opened and the car entered the property. Alexander was waiting at the main entrance, but now he wasn't alone. Beside him, an elegant woman of approximately 60 years observed her with calculating eyes. Her grey hair was tied in an impeccable bun, and she wore a two-piece suit that screamed expensive discretion. "Emily, this is Victoria Hamilton, my mother." Alexander made the introductions formally. "Mother, Emily Parker, my future wife." Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, dear. Alexander told me about you too." Emily shook the offered hand, immediately feeling that she was being evaluated like merchandise. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Hamilton. Please call me Victoria." The older woman gave a discreet but obviously critical glance at Emily's simple clothes. "I imagine you have much to learn about our family." Alexander intervened smoothly. "Mother, Emily must be tired from the trip. How about we leave the formal introductions for later?" Victoria nodded, but Emily noticed the unspoken tension between mother and son. "Of course, dear. I've arranged for Margaret to prepare the guest room for Emily." "Actually," Alexander corrected, "Emily will be staying in the master suite with me." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Alexander, I thought we had agreed. Mother, Emily is my fiancée. It's natural that she share my room." Emily felt her face burn. This part hadn't been discussed in the contract. She wondered what else Alexander had omitted from his specific conditions. "Of course," Victoria finally said, her tone icy. "As you wish." A uniformed man appeared to take Emily's suitcase, and Alexander guided her upstairs. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Marble floors, artwork on the walls, crystal chandeliers that seemed to cost more than her entire apartment. The master suite occupied an entire wing of the second floor. Emily had never seen such a large bedroom. There was a sitting area, an office, a closet the size of her old room, and a bathroom that looked more like a spa. "You can use the closet on the right," Alexander said, opening the doors of a completely empty wardrobe. "Tomorrow a personal shopper will come to provide your wardrobe." Emily looked around, feeling completely out of place. "Alexander, about sleeping in the same room. That wasn't in the contract." He turned to face her. "Emily, if we're going To convince people that we're a couple in love, we need to appear comfortable with each other. My mother is observant, as are the staff. Separate rooms would raise suspicions, but we barely know each other. It's a king-size bed. There's enough space to maintain our privacy. Emily felt cornered, but knew she wasn't in a position to negotiate. All right, but I need some basic rules. Alexander nodded. What kind? Of rules? Privacy in the bathroom, no physical intimacy beyond what's necessary to maintain appearances in public. And I want to know in advance whenever there are events or situations where I'll need to perform. Fair. Alexander checked his watch. I have a meeting in an hour, but first I need to explain some things about our official story. They sat in the bedroom's sitting area, and Alexander opened a folder he had brought. Officially, we met 6 months ago through a mutual friend. You studied literature at Harvard, worked with curation of a specialized library of rare works, and we decided to keep our relationship discreet until now. Emily tried to absorb the information. And why did we decide to get married now? Because we're in love and don't see any reason to wait longer. The word "in love" sounded strange coming from him, pronounced with the same neutrality with which he might say, "It's raining." Alexander, Emily said hesitantly, may I ask why you really need to do this? Why not actually marry someone from your social circle? Alexander was silent for a long moment, looking out the window that overlooked the gardens. My family has certain expectations. There are business-related pressures that require me to present an image of stability. What kind of pressures? Nothing you need to worry about. Emily realized she had reached the limit of what Alexander was willing to share. And your mother? Does she know the truth? My mother believes what I choose to tell her. More evasions. Emily began to realize that she had gotten involved in something much more complex than a simple financial arrangement. That afternoon, while Alexander was in his meetings, Emily explored the mansion. It was beautiful but cold, like a well-decorated museum where no one really lived. The staff were polite but distant, and she felt like an intruder in every room she visited. At the end of the day, when Alexander returned, he found Emily in the garden, sitting on a stone bench in front of an ornamental fountain. "How was your first day as the future Mrs. Hamilton?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Strange," Emily admitted. "Everything is so perfect, as if nothing here is really used or lived in." Alexander looked at the mansion, perhaps seeing it through her eyes for the first time. "My mother has always valued order and appearance above all else. And you? What do you value?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. Efficiency, results, control. Emily observed his profile as he spoke. Even relaxed, Alexander maintained. Her rigid posture as if he were always on guard. That must be tiring. What? Always being in control? Alexander looked at her with an expression Emily couldn't decipher. It's necessary. That night, as they prepared for bed, the tension in the room was palpable. Alexander had insisted that she use the bathroom first, and when Emily came out, already in her nightgown, she found him sitting in the armchair reading documents. "Aren't you coming to bed?" she asked, feeling ridiculous for asking the question. "I'll finish some papers first." Emily lay down on the left side of the enormous bed, pulling the sheets up to her chin. The mattress was so large that Alexander could sleep on the other side without her even feeling his presence. But when he finally joined her hours later, Emily discovered she was wrong. She woke briefly when she felt the mattress give under his weight, and for a moment she was hyper-aware of his breathing, of the heat of his body even at a distance, of the intimate strangeness of sharing a bed with a complete stranger. By morning, Alexander had already left when she awoke. On the nightstand she found a card with a handwritten message. "The personal shopper will arrive at 10 a.m. Victoria will accompany her. Be patient with her. She has good intentions, even when it doesn't seem like it." Emily smiled involuntarily. It was the first sign of real humanity Alexander had shown since they'd met. But her momentary tranquility was interrupted when Victoria appeared at the suite door, already perfectly dressed and made up at 8:30 in the morning. "Good morning, dear. I hope you slept well." The tone was polite, but Victoria's eyes scanned her critically. "We have a lot of work ahead of us." Emily had the feeling that her true transformation was about to begin, and didn't know if she was prepared for what that would mean. The transformation of Emily Parker into Emily Hamilton was a meticulous and at times painful process. Victoria supervised every detail with the precision of a general commanding a military operation. The personal shopper, a woman named Isabella who spoke about fabrics and cuts as if they were state secrets, brought dozens of dresses, shoes, bags, and accessories. "Your posture needs to change," Victoria observed, as Emily tried on the 10th dress of the morning. A Hamilton doesn't walk with hunched shoulders. Emily straightened her shoulders, feeling like a doll being dressed. "Sorry, I'm not used to such high heels." "You'll get used to them. Alexander expects his wife to make a good impression." Over the next few days, Emily was subjected to a series of lessons that Victoria had arranged: social etiquette, art history, French conversation, posture, and even how to correctly hold a wine glass. It was like an intensive course to become her completely different person. "Why is it so important that I know about French wines?" Emily asked during one particularly frustrating session. Victoria looked at her with an expression that mixed forced patience with genuine exasperation. "Because next week you'll be officially introduced to society as Alexander's fiancé. Every word you say, every gesture you make, will be analyzed and judged. We cannot allow you to embarrass the family." The word embarrass hurt more than Emily expected. She knew she was an intruder in this world, but hearing it so clearly made her feel even smaller. Alexander, meanwhile, was a constant but distant presence. He left early for work and returned late, usually finding Emily already asleep. Their only real moments of interaction happened during breakfast, and even then they were superficial conversations about the day's agenda or Emily's progress in her training. "How are you feeling about all this?" he asked one morning while reading the financial newspaper. Emily moved the eggs around on her plate, without much appetite. "Honestly, like I'm losing my identity." Alexander lowered the newspaper and looked at her. "It's temporary. In 2 years, you can go back to being who you were before." "And if I don't remember who I was before?" The question seemed to bother him. "You will remember." But Emily wasn't so sure. With each passing day, she felt more distant from the simple librarian she used to be. The expensive clothes, the etiquette lessons, the constant concern with appearance, all of this was changing. Not only how she saw herself, but how others saw her. On Thursday of the first week, Alexander announced during breakfast that the time had come for her first official public appearance. "There's a charity event tomorrow night," he said, passing her an elegant invitation. "It's organized by the Boston Children's Foundation. It will be our first appearance as an engaged couple." Emily felt her stomach tighten. "I still don't feel ready." "You are ready," Victoria intervened. "Isabella brought the perfect dress for the occasion." "What kind of event is this?" Emily asked, trying to control her nervousness. "A gala dinner. About 200 people from Boston's elite. Business people, politicians, artists," Alexander explained naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Emily swallowed hard. 200 people who would immediately notice that she didn't belong in that world. "Don't worry," Alexander continued, perhaps sensing her panic. "You'll be by my side the whole time. Just smile, be polite, and let me lead the conversations." That night, Emily could barely sleep. Beside her, Alexander breathed deeply, apparently without any anxiety about the event. How did he manage to always be so controlled? The next morning, the house was taken over by controlled agitation. Hairdresser, makeup artist, and Isabella arrived early to prepare Emily for her big debut. She was styled, made up, and dressed like a bride about to walk down the aisle. The dress was a high-fashion model in navy blue, elegant without being excessive, that perfectly enhanced her figure. The shoes were from an Italian brand she had only seen in magazines, and the jewelry borrowed from Victoria was genuinely dazzling. When Emily looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back at her was sophisticated, elegant, belonging to that world of luxury. But beneath all that perfection, she still felt like an imposter. "You look beautiful," said Alexander, when she came down the stairs. For the first time, she saw something that could be genuine admiration in his eyes. "Thank you," Emily replied, feeling strangely shy. The event was held in the ballroom of a 5-star hotel in the city centre. When they arrived, Emily was impressed by the grandeur of the place. Exotic flowers everywhere, perfectly arranged tables, a string quartet playing classical music. "Breathe," Alexander murmured in her ear as he took her by the arm. "You're perfect." The first hours passed in a blur of introductions. Emily smiled so much that her facial muscles began to hurt, repeated, "Nice to meet you" dozens of times, and tried to memorize names that all sounded the same to her. "Alexander, darling." An exuberant woman of approximately 50 years approached, kissing him on the cheek. "Finally, you've brought the famous fiancé. We heard you were dating in secret." "Francine, this is Emily." Alexander made the introduction naturally. "Emily Francine Oliveira, a great friend of the family." Emily extended her hand, but Francine pulled her into a hug. "Dear, how lovely. Alexander hid you very well from us. Tell me everything. How did you meet?" Emily felt panic rise in her throat, but before she could respond, Alexander smoothly intervened. "Francine, you know how private I am. We preferred to maintain our privacy until we were sure it was serious." "And now you're sure?" Francine asked with a mischievous smile. Alexander looked at Emily, and for a moment she saw something that could be tenderness in his eyes. "Completely." The response was given with such conviction that Emily almost believed it was true. During dinner, Emily observed Alexander in his natural element. He circulated among the tables with ease, greeting some, conversing with others, always with the right word at the right time. It was impressive how he managed to maintain dozens of superficial, but apparently meaningful conversations with he's impressive, isn't he?" said a voice beside her. Emily turned and found a man of approximately 35 years, tall, with green eyes and a warm smile. He was handsome in a more accessible way than Alexander, less intimidating, more human. "Sorry, we haven't been introduced," he continued, extending his hand. "Dr. Nathan Roberts." "Emily Parker. Emily Hamilton," she corrected herself, still not used to the new surname. Nathan smiled. "Still getting used to the change? I can imagine how intimidating it must be to enter this world." Emily immediately felt at ease with him. "It's a little scary, to be honest." "Alexander and I have been friends for a long time," Nathan explained. "Actually, we were college classmates. It's rare to see him so relaxed." Emily looked at Alexander, who was conversing with a group of businessmen on the other side of the ballroom. "Relaxed?" "He's been different since he started dating you." "Lighter, in a way." Emily was surprised. "Really?" "Definitely. Alexander has always been very controlled, very focused on business. I've never seen him allow himself to get emotionally involved with anyone." Nathan's words left her confused. If Alexander was different, she couldn't tell. To her, he was still the cold, controlled man who had appeared at the library. "Do you know the Hamilton family well?" Emily asked, curious. Nathan hesitated for a moment. "Reasonably well. Why do you ask?" "Just curiosity. I'm still learning about my fiancé's family." "Alexander doesn't talk much about the family." "He's not very talkative about anything," Emily admitted, then realized she might have been too honest. Nathan laughed. "That's typical of him, but Emily, can I give you some advice? Alexander may seem closed off, but he's a good man. Maybe you just need patience to really get to know him." Before Emily could respond, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Alexander had approached without her noticing. "Nathan, I see you've met my fiancée," he said, his tone cordial, but with a note of something Emily couldn't identify. "I was just telling her how you've changed for the better," Nathan responded with a smile. Alexander looked at Emily, then back at Nathan. "How kind of you. Emily, are you ready to go? We have a long day ahead of us tomorrow." In the car on the way back, Alexander was more silent than usual. Emily tried to make conversation a few times, but he responded with monosyllables. "Did I do something wrong? She finally asked. Alexander looked at her, seeming surprised. Why do you ask? You've been different since we talked with Nathan. Nathan is a good friend, Alexander said carefully, but he has a tendency to be overly familiar with people he's just met. Emily sensed there was something more in his speech, but couldn't decipher what. He seemed kind. He is, just be careful not to be carried away by his charm. What does that mean? Alexander didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his words were measured. It means that not all friends of the family have the best intentions. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. Does Nathan have bad intentions? Not necessarily. But in this world, Emily, people aren't always what they seem to be. When they arrived home, Emily went up to the bedroom with more questions than answers. There was something Alexander wasn't telling her. Something about Nathan, about the family, about the whole situation. As she changed, she rethought the conversation. Nathan had said Alexander was different, more relaxed. But if that were true, why did she only see the controlled and distant version of him? And more importantly, what exactly was Alexander hiding from her? When he entered the bedroom, Emily was already lying down, pretending to sleep. But she stayed awake for hours, listening to his breathing beside her, feeling more lonely than ever amid all that luxury. Something was happening, something that went beyond a simple matrimonial contract. Emily just didn't know yet whether she should be afraid or whether she should try to discover the truth. The first week after the charity event brought a noticeable change to the routine at the Hamilton mansion. Emily would wake up finding social. Newspapers spread across the breakfast table, with photos of her and Alexander highlighted in the society pages. "The business prince finally surrenders to love," read one headline. "Who is Alexander Hamilton's mysterious fiancée?" questioned another. "You did very well," Victoria commented one morning, leafing through the pages with approval. "The photos look elegant and all the comments are positive." Emily observed the images of herself smiling beside Alexander. They looked genuinely in love, a testimony to Alexander's ability to control even his facial expressions. "When is the next event?" asked Emily, already dreading the answer. "Saturday, the annual dinner of the Business Association," Alexander replied, looking up from his documents. "And next week, the cocktail party for the inauguration of the Santana family's new art gallery." Emily sighed internally. The social life of Boston's elite seemed to be an endless succession of events, where the same people met to discuss the same subjects. "Alexander," she said hesitantly, "can I ask a question?" He nodded, but didn't stop reading his papers. "For how long will we need to maintain this intensity? I mean, how many events per week?" "Why? Are you getting tired already?" There was a slightly defensive tone in his voice that Emily didn't understand. "It's not that. It's just that it's very different from the life I was used to." Alexander finally lowered the documents and looked at her directly. "Emily, you knew what you were accepting when you signed the contract." "I knew. There would be social events. I didn't know it would be almost every night." "It's not every night." "Alexander," Victoria intervened smoothly, "perhaps we can space out the commitments a bit in the first few weeks. Emily is still adapting." Emily was surprised by the unexpected support from her mother-in-law, but Alexander seemed irritated. "Mother, we can't appear reclusive. People expect to see us. And they will, we just don't need to overdo it." Alexander studied the two women for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. But Emily, you need to understand that our social visibility is important for business." Once again, Emily felt that information was being omitted. "What kind of business?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Alexander's standard response was beginning to irritate her. "Alexander, if I'm going to represent your family in public, I don't think it's too much to ask to understand the basics of what you do." Alexander exchanged a look with Victoria before responding. "Our company has interests in various sectors. Sometimes personal relationships influence business decisions." "Are you saying our fake marriage is good for business?" "I'm saying that a married man inspires more confidence than a single one." Emily couldn't help a bitter laugh. "So I'm basically a marketing tool." Alexander looked visibly uncomfortable. It's not quite like that. Then what is it like? The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Alexander's phone. He answered immediately, obviously relieved by the interruption. Hello? Yes, I'm aware. When? I understand. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and stood up hurriedly. I need to go. An urgent situation has come up at the office. After Alexander left, Emily and Victoria were left alone in the dining room. It was the first time they had spent significant time, just the two of them, without Alexander's mediating presence. He's not very good at explaining things, is he? Victoria commented, pouring more coffee for herself. Emily was surprised by the observation. No, he's not. Alexander has always been that way, since he was little, kept everything to himself, as if sharing information would give weapons to enemies. And do you have enemies? Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Dear, when you have what we have, there are always people who want to take it from you. Emily felt a shiver. What kind of people? Competitors, ambitious relatives, opportunists. Victoria paused. Resentful ex-girlfriends. Did Alexander have serious relationships before? There were some women over the years, none that he took really seriously. Victoria studied Emily with curiosity. Until you. Emily almost choked on her coffee. We're not. It's complicated. All relationships are complicated, dear. But I can see how he looks. At you. How does he look at me? Like you're something precious that he's afraid of breaking. Emily was confused. Victoria, you know that our relationship began in a non-conventional way, right? Victoria smiled. Dear, no relationship in this family began conventionally. My marriage to Alexander's father was arranged by the families. We lived together for 30 years and only discovered that we truly loved each other in the last 5. The revelation surprised Emily. You had an arranged marriage? It's more common than you imagine in families like ours. Love, when it comes, is a bonus. And if it doesn't come, Victoria shrugged, then you learn to live with mutual respect and shared interests. It's not the worst fate in the world. Emily spent the rest of the morning reflecting on the conversation. Did Alexander really see her differently, as Victoria had suggested, or was her mother-in-law just being kind? Her reflections were interrupted when Margaret, the housekeeper, announced that there was a visitor. Dr. Nathan Roberts is here, Mum. He said he wanted to greet you. Emily was surprised. He didn't make an appointment? He said he was passing through the area and decided to make a quick visit. Emily hesitated. Alexander had made it clear that she should be careful with Nathan, but hadn't explained why, and he wasn't home to guide her on how to proceed. Tell him I'll be there in a few minutes, she decided. Nathan was waiting in the visiting room, admiring a painting on the wall. When Emily entered, he turned with that warm smile that had reassured her at the event. Emily, I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I was returning from the hospital and thought I'd stop by. Of course, no problem. Alexander isn't here. But actually, I came to talk to you, Nathan interrupted. There's something I'd like to discuss. Emily felt a pang of nervousness. What is it about? Nathan looked around as if checking if they were alone. It's about Alexander and about his family. What about them? Emily, may I ask a direct question? Do you know the complete history of the Hamilton family? Emily became defensive. Why do you ask? Because I have the impression that Alexander hasn't told you everything, and as the family doctor for years, I feel I have a responsibility. What kind of responsibility? Nathan moved closer, lowering his voice. Emily, there are things about this family that you should know, especially if you're going to marry Alexander. What kind of things? For example, do you know why Alexander's father really passed away? Emily felt the floor move beneath her feet. Passed away? Alexander never told me his father had. He always speaks in the present tense. Nathan seemed surprised. You? I didn't know. William Hamilton departed 3 years ago. It was very sudden, very controversial. Controversial how? There were rumors that it wasn't natural. Enormous financial problems in the company, pressure from creditors, federal investigations. Nathan paused dramatically. Some say he couldn't handle the pressure. Emily was shocked. Are you insinuating that... I'm not insinuating anything, just sharing information that you, as Alexander's future wife, should know. Why are you telling me this? Nathan looked at her with an expression that mixed concern and something else she couldn't identify. Because I worry about you, Emily. You seem genuine, real. And this world can destroy people like you. What do you mean, people like me? Good people, people who believe that everyone around them has good intentions. Emily felt anger rising in her throat. And you think Alexander has bad intentions toward me? I think Alexander is desperate, and desperate men do things they normally wouldn't do. Desperate about what? Nathan hesitated, as if deciding how much he should reveal. The company is in serious financial difficulty. There are rumors that Alexander could lose everything if he doesn't secure some important contracts in the next few months. And what does that have to do with me? A married man, especially with a wife who inspires public sympathy, has more credibility with investors and business partners. Emily felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Are you saying Alexander married me for money? I'm saying you should ask some questions and maybe investigate a little before signing anything definitive. Before Emily could respond, they heard the sound of a car arriving. Nathan looked out the window and tensed. Alexander is back early. Emily, please. Don't mention our conversation. At least not until you've had time to process what I said. Why not? Because Alexander might not react well to knowing I talked to you about family matters. Why not? Think about what I said, Emily, and if you need to talk, you have my card. He headed quickly for the back door, just as Alexander entered through the front. Emily was still standing in the visiting room, trying to process everything she had just heard, when Alexander appeared. Emily, Margaret said there was a visitor. It was just a salesman, she lied, surprised by how easily the lie came out of her mouth. Alexander studied her for a moment. Are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine, just a little tired. Alexander approached and, to her surprise, placed his hand on her forehead. You don't have a fever. The touch was gentle, almost intimate, and Emily felt her heart race, but Nathan's words echoed in her mind. Desperate men do things they normally wouldn't do. Alexander, she said impulsively, can we talk? Of course. About what? Emily looked into his eyes, searching for signs of dishonesty, manipulation, desperation, but all she saw was the same controlled expression as always. About us. About our agreement. About what's really happening here. Alexander stood motionless. What do you mean? Emily took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a dangerous line. I mean that I have the feeling you're not telling me everything, and if we're going to continue with this, I need to know the truth. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and Emily had the impression that he was waging an internal battle between telling the truth and keeping his secrets. Finally, he spoke. Emily, there are things that are better left in the past. Trust me. But I want to know about your father. Alexander went completely rigid. Who talked about my father? Emily realized she had made a mistake. You never mentioned that he had passed away. And how did you find out? The question was asked with a coldness that made Emily feel afraid for the first time since she had met Alexander. She realized she had completely underestimated the complexity of the situation she had gotten herself into. Alexander, please don't be angry. Who talked about my father, Emily? The repetition of the question, made with even more coldness, made it clear that Alexander would not accept evasions. Emily realized her answer could change everything between them, for better or for much worse. The silence in the room seemed to extend for an eternity. Emily looked at Alexander, seeing for the first time an expression she couldn't completely decipher, a mixture of anger, fear, and something that could be betrayal. She realized she had reached a point of no return. It was Nathan, she said finally, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. "He came here today and told me about your father." Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to control something very powerful inside him. When he opened them again, Emily saw a coldness that frightened her. "What exactly did Nathan tell you?" "That your father had passed away 3 years ago, that there were controversial circumstances, and that the company is having financial problems." Alexander began pacing around the room, his hands closed into fists. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe, Alexander. You've never told me anything about your family, about your business, about anything. How can I know who to trust?" "You should trust me," he said, stopping his pacing and facing her. "I am your husband." "You are my employer," Emily corrected, the words coming out harsher than she intended. "We have a business contract, remember?" The observation seemed to hit Alexander like a slap. He stood motionless for a moment, then went to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, even though it was only noon. "You want to know about my father?" he said finally, without turning to face her. "Very well. Yes, William Hamilton passed away 3 years ago. Yes, there were controversial circumstances. And yes, the company faced serious financial problems." Emily felt her heart race. "What happened to him?" Alexander drank the whiskey in one gulp. "My father was a proud man. He built this empire from nothing, worked 16 hours a day for 40 years to give our family what we have today." He turned to her, and Emily saw pain in his eyes for the first time. When the problems started, the economic crisis, the cancelled contracts, the federal investigations that never went anywhere, he began making desperate decisions. Loans, with absurd interest rates, partnerships with questionable people, risky investments that only made the situation worse. Emily approached cautiously. "Alexander." One morning, he simply didn't wake up. Massive heart attack. The doctors said it was stress, pressure. Alexander laughed bitterly. "Nathan was there when it happened. He was the one who tried to resuscitate him." "Is that why you have problems with Nathan?" "I have problems with Nathan because he can't keep his mouth shut about matters that aren't his business," Alexander replied coldly. "And because he's always had a thing for committed women." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means Nathan has tried to interfere in other men's relationships in the family before, including mine." "You had other serious relationships?" Alexander hesitated, as if deciding how much he should reveal. "There was a woman a few years ago. We were going to get married." Emily felt a pang of something she didn't want to identify as jealousy. "What happened?" "Nathan happened. He convinced her that I was dangerous, controlling, that our family had dark secrets. She broke up with me 2 weeks before the wedding." "And did you have dark secrets?" Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. "Emily, every wealthy family has secrets. The question is whether they're secrets that hurt innocent people or just secrets that protect what we've built." "And your secrets? Do they protect or hurt?" "Protect," he answered without hesitation. "Protect you, protect my mother, protect our employees, protect everything my father built." Emily felt even more confused. "Alexander, why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you let me find out through Nathan?" Alexander poured himself another whiskey. "Because I wanted you to get to know me without the prejudices that this story brings. I wanted you to form your own opinion about who I am." "And who are you?" "I'm a man who's trying to save his family's legacy. I'm a man who makes mistakes, but who would never hurt someone who is important to him." Emily realized that Alexander had almost said something different. "Alexander, can I ask a question?" He nodded. "Why me? Of the hundreds of women you could have chosen for this arrangement, why did you specifically choose me?" Alexander was silent for so long that Emily began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower. "Because when I saw you in that library, organizing those books with such care, you reminded me of someone." "Someone you loved?" "Someone I lost." Emily felt her heart tighten. "The woman who was going to marry you?" "No." Alexander looked out the window at the gardens. "My sister." The revelation caught her completely off guard. "You have a sister?" "Had Sophia. She was 3 years younger than me and the kindest person I've ever known." Alexander smiled sadly. "She loved libraries, said books were the only things in the world that never lied." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. "What happened to her?" "Car accident 5 years ago. She was returning from university when a drunk driver—" Alexander couldn't finish the sentence. Emily saw his hands trembling slightly. "Alexander, I'm so sorry. When I saw you in that library, for a moment it was as if Sophia was there. Not physically, you don't look that much alike. But there was something in the way you treated those books, as if each one was precious." Emily moved closer to him, all her anger and confusion evaporating in the face of the pain she saw in his eyes. "Is that why you never touch me?" she asked softly. "Because I remind you of her?" Alexander looked at her, surprised. "I didn't think you had noticed." "Alexander, we've shared a bed for 2 weeks. It's kind of hard not to notice that you act as if I'm made of crystal." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Maybe I act that way because you are made of crystal, at least in this world." Emily put her hand on his arm. "I'm not your sister, Alexander, and I'm not fragile." Alexander looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. No, I'm an adult woman who made a conscious choice, and who is starting to care about you in a way that goes beyond our contract." The confession came out before Emily could stop herself. Alexander stood motionless, looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. "Emily, I know. This wasn't in the agreement," she continued quickly. "I know it complicates things, but I can't pretend it's not happening." Alexander raised his hand and gently touched her face. "You have no idea what you're saying." "Yes, I do. I'm saying that this fake marriage is becoming real for me, even if it isn't for you. And if I say it's becoming real for me too." Emily felt her heart stop. "Is it?" Instead of answering, Alexander leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a performative kiss like the ones they exchanged in public, but something soft, hesitant, real. Emily felt something inside her completely melt. When they separated, both were breathless. "Alexander," Emily whispered, "what are we doing?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to stop." They stayed like this for a moment, too close, looking at each other as if they were seeing each other for the first time. Emily felt she had crossed a definitive line. There was no more pretending that this was just a business agreement. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Alexander's phone. He answered reluctantly. "Hello? What? When?" "I understand. I'll be there immediately." He hung up, his expression changing instantly. "What happened?" Emily asked. "Problems at the office. I need to go." Alexander picked up his jacket but stopped at the door and turned to her. "Emily, about what Nathan said, about the company's financial problems. It's true that we're facing difficulties, but I'm not desperate enough to use you just as a business tool." "No?" "No. If that were all, I would have chosen someone from a known family, someone who would bring useful connections, not an unknown librarian who makes me question everything I thought I knew about myself." After Alexander left, Emily was alone in the room, still feeling the taste of his kiss on her lips. Everything had changed in the matter of an hour. She had discovered secrets about the family, had confessed her feelings, and had been kissed by a man she was beginning to truly love. But Nathan's words still echoed in her mind. Was Alexander being honest about his motives, or was she just another piece in a game much more complex than she imagined? Emily knew she needed answers, and perhaps it was time to do her own investigation into the Hamilton family. That afternoon, while Alexander was at the office and Victoria had gone out for her social activities, Emily did something she had never done before. She searched the house. She started with Alexander's office on the upper floor. The drawers were locked, but Emily found a spare key in Victoria's jewelry box. Apparently even wealthy families had their little domestic secrets. What she found left her simultaneously relieved and worried. There were financial documents that confirmed the company's difficulties, but also evidence that Alexander was working tirelessly to solve the problems without harming employees or partners. It didn't seem like the behavior of a desperate, unscrupulous man. But then she found something that changed everything, a folder marked Confidential EP, her own initials. Inside the folder was a complete dossier on her life, not just basic information but intimate details, her habits, her preferences, information about Sarah and her illness, even photos of her at the library that had clearly been taken without her knowledge. Emily felt nausea rising in her throat. Alexander hadn't simply chosen her randomly. He had investigated her, studied her, chosen her surgically for reasons she still didn't fully understand. But the worst was yet to come. At the bottom of the folder, she found a document that made her question everything she thought she knew about her situation. It was a detailed medical report about Sarah, including information that not even Emily knew. And on the last page, a handwritten note that chilled her to the bone. Confirmed, candidate's only sister. Rare disease, uncertain prognosis without experimental treatment. Perfect emotional leverage to ensure long-term compliance. Emily let the document fall from her trembling hands. Alexander not only knew about Sarah from the beginning, he had planned to use her illness as a form of control. Everything had been calculated, manipulated, orchestrated. The kiss, the confessions, the apparent vulnerability, all part of a much more complex game than she had imagined. Emily felt completely betrayed. But more than that, she felt stupid for having believed that someone like Alexander Hamilton could really be interested in someone like her. When she heard the car arriving, Emily quickly put everything back in place and ran to the bedroom. She needed time to process what she had discovered, to decide what to do with this information. One thing was certain, the game had completely changed, and Emily was determined to discover exactly what Alexander Hamilton really wanted from her. Emily spent the entire night awake, staring at the ceiling while Alexander slept peacefully beside her. Each breath he took irritated her more. Each involuntary movement reminded her of how naive she had been. The man who had kissed her with such affection a few hours earlier was the same one who had a detailed dossier on her life, including notes, on how to use her sister's illness to control her. By morning, Emily was determined to confront him, but Alexander woke up before her and left early for an important meeting. He left a note saying he would return late in the afternoon and that they had the gallery cocktail party that night. The cocktail party. Emily had completely forgotten. The idea of having to smile and pretend happiness beside Alexander, knowing what she knew now, made her feel physically ill. Victoria appeared at breakfast with her usual elegance, but Emily noticed there was something different about her mother-in-law, a tension she was trying to hide. "Are you all right, dear?" "You look tired," Victoria observed, serving herself coffee. "I didn't sleep very well," Emily admitted. "Nervous about tonight's event?" Emily almost laughed at the irony. "Something like that." Victoria studied her for a moment. "Emily, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you really love my son?" The question caught her off guard. Emily looked at Victoria, trying to decipher if there was any trap behind the question. "Why do you ask?" "Because a mother notices these things. And because there's something in your eyes today that worries me." Emily felt tears forming but managed to control them. "Victoria, do you know all the arrangements that Alexander made for our marriage?" Victoria went motionless. "What kind of arrangements?" "The financial ones, the contractual ones." A heavy silence settled between them. Victoria placed the coffee cup on the table with excessive care. "Emily, what have you discovered?" "Did you know that Alexander investigated me before making the proposal, that he has detailed information about my life, about Sarah, about everything?" Victoria closed her eyes. "My God. You knew?" "I knew Alexander was being meticulous in his choice, but I didn't know the extent." Emily felt anger rising. "Meticulous? Victoria, he has notes about how to use my sister's illness to control me." Victoria went pale. "That cannot be true." "I saw it with my own eyes." Victoria stood up abruptly and began pacing the room. Emily, I need to tell you something. Something Alexander doesn't know that I know. What? 3 months ago, before Alexander made his proposal, he received a visit. A man who said he represented some creditors as the arm of the company. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. What kind of creditors? The kind that doesn't accept no for an answer. They gave Alexander an ultimatum. Find a way to stabilize the company's image and secure new investments, or face very serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Victoria hesitated. The kind that could put the entire family in danger. Emily felt the world spinning around her. Are you saying Alexander married me out of fear? I'm saying my son might be more desperate than any of us imagine. At that moment, Margaret came running into the room, visibly agitated. Mrs. Victoria, there are men at the door. They say they need to speak with Mr. Alexander urgently. Victoria and Emily exchanged an alarmed look. What kind of men? Victoria asked. Men in suits, ma'am. Very serious. They said they'll return later if Mr. Alexander isn't here. Victoria paled even more. Emily, you need to call Alexander now. Emily picked up the phone with trembling hands. Alexander answered on the 3rd ring. Emily, what is it? There are men here looking for you. Victoria is worried. There was silence on the other end of the line. What kind of men? Men in suits, serious. Alexander sighed deeply. Tell them I'll be there in an hour, and Emily, won't stay away from them, all right? Alexander, what's happening? We'll talk when I get there. He hung up, leaving Emily even more confused and frightened. The men returned. 2 hours later, exactly when Alexander was arriving home. Emily watched from the bedroom window as they conversed in the garden. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but Alexander's body language made it clear it wasn't a friendly conversation. When the men finally left, Alexander entered the house with an expression Emily had never seen before, a mixture of anger, fear, and determination. We need to talk, he said as soon as he saw her. They met in the library, away from curious ears. Alexander closed the door and turned to her. Emily, there are things I need to tell you, things I should have told you from the beginning. Like the fact that you investigated me before making your proposal. Alexander went motionless. How did you know? I found the dossier. With the notes about Sarah being an emotional leverage. Alexander closed his eyes and ran his hands through his hair. Emily, I can explain. Can you? Then explain how you knew about Sarah's illness before you even met me. Explain how you planned to use her suffering to manipulate me. It wasn't like that. No? Then how was it, Alexander? Alexander approached her, but Emily backed away. Emily, please let me explain. Yes, I investigated you. Yes, I knew about Sarah. But it wasn't a cold manipulation like you're thinking. Then what was it? It was desperation. Pure and simple desperation. Alexander sat heavily in an armchair. The men who were here today, they represent very dangerous people. People to whom my father owed a lot of money before he passed away. Emily felt real fear for the first time. What kind of people? The kind who don't care about legal methods to recover debts. They gave me 6 months to pay everything. We're in the 5th month. And how much is everything? $5 million. The amount was impossible to comprehend. Emily sat down too, feeling her legs weak. Alexander, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't want to frighten you. And because, he hesitated, because when I started to really know you, I realized I was falling in love, and I didn't want you to know that our relationship had begun for such desperate reasons. Emily looked at him, trying to detect if he was lying. You're falling in love with me. I'm in love with you, Alexander corrected. Completely, irremediably in love. Even knowing that this complicates all your plans? Especially because of that. Emily felt her heart race, but forced herself to stay focused. Alexander, did you really believe a fake marriage would solve your financial problems? Not entirely, but a married man inspires more confidence in investors, and you have something that other women in my social circle don't have. What? Authenticity. When you smile, people believe it's real. When you show interest, they feel special. You have a natural charisma that can't be bought or taught. Emily didn't know if she should feel flattered or insulted. So you chose me because I'm a good actress? I chose you because you are real, and because, without knowing it, you gave me something I hadn't had in years. What? Hope. Emily looked at Alexander, seeing genuine vulnerability in his eyes. Alexander, what will happen if you don't get the money? You'd prefer not to know. I want to know. Alexander sighed. First, they'll take all. The company's assets, then personal assets, and if that's not enough, what? They'll find other ways to recover their investment. Emily felt a shiver. Are you saying your life is in danger? Our life, Emily. If you stay married to me, you automatically become a target too. The revelation hit her like lightning. Is that why you've been so protective? Why you don't want me to go out alone? Partially, yes. Emily was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had discovered. Alexander, is there anything else you haven't told me? Alexander hesitated. There is a possibility, a way to solve everything. What way? A very lucrative contract with an international company. They're willing to invest in our company, but they want to meet you first. They want to be sure we're a stable and reliable couple. Emily laughed bitterly. And are we? Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. We can be if you want. What does that mean? It means I don't want a fake marriage anymore, Emily. I want a real marriage. With you. Emily felt her heart stop. Alexander. I know it started as an arrangement. I know you have every reason not to trust me. But Emily, what I feel for you is real. More real than anything I've ever felt in my life. Emily looked at him, seeing sincerity in his eyes, but still feeling confused and hurt by the revelations. Alexander, I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. Maybe we should cancel tonight's event. We can't. The investors will be there. It's our only chance to make a good impression. Emily sighed. Then let's go. But Alexander. Yes? Don't touch me. Tonight, unless it's absolutely necessary to maintain appearances. I need space to process all this. Alexander nodded, clearly hurt, but respecting her decision. I understand. That night, at the gallery cocktail party, Emily forced herself to smile and converse with dozens of people, including the international investors Alexander had mentioned. They were a German couple, friendly and genuinely interested in the work of the Hamilton Company. You make such a harmonious couple, commented the investor's wife. It's rare to see so much synchrony between such young people. Emily smiled, feeling like a complete fraud. Thank you. Throughout the night, she observed Alexander interact with the guests, seeing for the first time how he really worked. He was charming without being fake, intelligent without being arrogant, and genuinely interested in the people he talked to. But Emily also noticed the moments when he thought no one was looking, how his shoulders curved slightly with the weight of pressure, how he discreetly massaged his temples when he thought she wasn't watching. Around 11 at night, when they were preparing to leave, the German investors approached. Alexander, Emily, it was a pleasure to get to know you better tonight, said the man. We would like to schedule a meeting for next week to discuss our proposal in detail. Alexander tried to disguise his relief, but Emily knew him well enough now to notice. It will be a pleasure. In the car, on the way back home, they were silent. Emily watched the city lights passing by the window, thinking about everything she had discovered that day. Emily, Alexander finally said, thank you for tonight. I know it wasn't easy for you. Alexander, can I ask a question? Of course. If you get this contract, if you solve all the financial problems, will you? I still want to stay married to me? Alexander stopped the car on the shoulder and turned to look at her. Emily, do you really think my feelings for you have anything to do with money or contracts? I don't know what to think anymore. Alexander took her hands gently. Then let me be very clear. Even if I lost everything tomorrow, the company, the house, all the money, I would still want to be with you. Because you're the first person in years who makes me feel that I can be just Alexander, not the Hamilton heir or the savior of the family business. Emily looked into his eyes, searching for signs of lies, but all she saw was sincerity. Alexander, Before she could finish, his phone rang. Alexander looked at the screen and tensed. It's Nathan, he said. Must be about your sister. Emily felt immediate panic. Sarah, what about Sarah? Alexander answered quickly. Nathan, what? When? I understand. We're heading there now. He hung up and looked at Emily with a grave expression. Emily, we need to go to the hospital. Sarah had a complication. Emily's world collapsed. Everything else, the secrets, the investors, the marriage, ceased to matter in the face of the possibility of losing her sister. Will she be okay? Emily asked, her voice breaking. Alexander held her hands more firmly. We'll find out together. As they rushed to the hospital, Emily realized something. Regardless of all the secrets and manipulations, Alexander was there for her when she needed him most, and that had to mean something. The hospital was immersed in the peculiar quietness of the early morning hours, broken only by the sounds of medical equipment and the hurried steps of nurses through the corridors. Emily paced back and forth in the waiting room, her hands trembling while Alexander tried to obtain information at the reception. What's taking so long? Emily murmured, more to herself than to anyone specific. When Alexander returned, his face didn't reveal good news. Nathan is with her now. He said it was an adverse reaction to the new medication, but that she's stabilized. Emily felt her legs weaken. Adverse reaction? Does that mean the treatment isn't working? Not necessarily. Sometimes the body needs time to adapt. Alexander guided her to a chair and sat beside her. For the first time since they met, Emily didn't worry about maintaining distance or appearances. She needed human comfort, and Alexander was all she had at that moment. Alexander, she said with a choked voice, if anything happens to Sarah, nothing will happen. You can't promise that. I can promise that we'll do everything within our reach. The best treatment, the best doctors, everything. Emily looked at him through her tears. Even if it costs a fortune that you don't have? Alexander took her hands and held them firmly. Emily, there are things more important than money. Since when do you believe that? Since I met you. Before Emily could respond, Nathan appeared in the corridor, still wearing a medical coat. His face was tired, but there was no despair in his expression. How is she? Emily stood up immediately. Stable. The reaction was strong, but we managed to control it. She's sleeping now, but can already receive visitors. Emily felt such great relief that she almost fainted. Alexander held her by the arm, offering support. Can I see her? Emily asked. Of course. Room 412. When Emily headed for the elevator, Alexander hesitated. Go, Nathan said to him. She needs you. Alexander looked at Nathan with an expression Emily couldn't completely decipher. Nathan, thank you. For everything. It's my job, Alexander, and my responsibility as a friend of the family. In the room, Sarah was pale but awake, smiling weakly when she saw Emily enter. Hi, Em, sorry about the scare. Emily ran to the bed and hugged her sister carefully. Don't apologize for that. How are you feeling? Tired but better. Dr. Nathan said it was just a reaction to the new medicine. Emily looked at Alexander, who had remained discreetly near the door. Sarah followed her gaze. You must be the famous Alexander, Sarah said with a stronger smile. Emily doesn't stop talking about you. Alexander approached. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sarah. I'm sorry about the circumstances. Thank you for taking care of my sister. She can be stubborn sometimes. Emily blushed. Sarah. It's true, she always tries to carry the world on her shoulders alone. Alexander looked at Emily. I've noticed that. They spent another hour at the hospital until Sarah fell asleep again. Nathan appeared to check her vital signs and assured them she was out of immediate danger. "The treatment continues?" Emily asked as they left the room. "Yes, but with adjustments to the dosage. Sarah is strong, Emily. She'll overcome this." In the parking lot, as they walked to the car, Emily finally allowed herself to feel all the fear and exhaustion of the night. "Alexander, I need to tell you something." "What?" "Tonight, when I thought I might lose Sarah, I realized that you were the first person I wanted by my side. Not because you had to be, but because I wanted you to be." Alexander stopped walking. "Emily, let me finish. I know our story began in a complicated way. I know you investigated me, that you planned everything meticulously. I know there are secrets and dangers that I still don't completely understand." Alexander opened his mouth to speak, but Emily continued. "But I also know that when you kissed me yesterday, it wasn't calculated. I know that when you hold me when I'm scared, it's not part of any plan. And I know that when you look at me, I see something real in your eyes." "What are you trying to say?" Emily took a deep breath. "I'm trying to say that I want to try to make this something real." Alexander stood motionless for a moment, then pulled her into a hug. "Emily, are you sure? Because once we say it's real, there's no going back." "I'm sure." When they separated, both were smiling despite the tears. Then Alexander said, "How about we start? Everything over? No contracts, no secrets, no games." "How?" Alexander moved away a bit and, to Emily's surprise, knelt in the middle of the hospital parking lot. "Emily Parker, will you marry me? For real this time?" Emily laughed through her tears. "Alexander, you're crazy. It's 3 in the morning, we're in a hospital parking lot, and you don't even have a ring." Alexander smiled. "It's the most honest proposal I've ever made in my life." "Yes," Emily said, pulling him up. "Yes, I accept." They kissed right there under the cold lights of the parking lot, and Emily felt that she was finally where she should be. 3 weeks later, life had become surprisingly normal, at least the Hamilton family's version of normal. The German investors had approved the contract, ensuring not only the company's survival, but also its expansion into international markets. The dangerous debts were paid off, and the men in suits stopped appearing at the mansion. Sarah was responding well to the adjusted treatment and had been transferred to a private room at the best hospital in the city. Emily visited her every day, sometimes accompanied by Alexander, who had developed a genuine friendship with his sister-in-law. "You know," Sarah said one afternoon, "when Emily told me about the arranged marriage, I thought she had gone crazy." Alexander, who was peeling an apple for Sarah, laughed. "And now? Now I think you two are perfect for each other, 2 controllers trying to take care of everyone around them." Emily protested from the armchair, where she was reading a book. "I'm not controlling." "Emily," Sarah and Alexander said, in unison, "Yes, you are." The harmony was interrupted when Nathan entered the room for the daily checkup. He had kept his distance from Alexander since the night at the hospital, but always remained professional. "How is our patient today?" he asked, checking the chart. "Much better," Sarah replied. "Dr. Nathan, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Why were you and Alexander so tense with each other before? Emily told me you were friends." Nathan looked at Alexander, who nodded discreetly. "Sarah," Nathan said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "sometimes friends disagree about what's best for each other." "You disagreed about Emily?" "I thought Alexander was unnecessarily complicating her life." Alexander moved closer. "And I thought Nathan was interfering where he shouldn't." "And now?" Sarah asked. Alexander extended his hand to Nathan. "Now I think we both wanted to protect people we care about." Nathan shook the offered hand. "And now I see that Emily can take care of herself very well." Emily observed the reconciliation of the 2 important men in her life and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. That night at the mansion, Emily and Alexander were in the garden, walking among the flowers that were beginning to bloom with the arrival of spring. "Alexander," Emily said, "there's one thing I never asked you." "What?" Why did you really cancel that first marriage? What did Nathan tell your ex-fiancée that made her change her mind? Alexander stopped walking and looked at the stars. He told her, I would never truly love her because I was still in love with a ghost. Your sister? Yes, and he was right. I was so stuck in the past, so determined to protect Sophia's memory, that I couldn't open myself to anything real. And what changed? Alexander turned to her. You showed me that honoring someone's memory doesn't mean stopping living. Emily smiled. Sophia would be proud to see who you've become. You think so? I'm sure. Any sister would be proud. To have a brother who fights so hard for his family, who cares so much about the people he loves. Alexander pulled her closer. Emily, there's something I want to give you. He took a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple but elegant ring with a solitaire diamond. Alexander, it's beautiful, but you didn't have to. Yes, I did. The first time I proposed to you, I didn't have a ring. I want to do this right. Emily laughed. You proposed to me, remember? I just accepted. Then now, it's my turn to accept. Emily looked confused. What do you mean? Alexander took her hands. Emily Parker Hamilton, will you stay married to me for the rest of our lives, forever, with no fixed-term contracts? Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. Yes, Alexander, I will. When he placed the ring on her finger, Emily realized she had finally found her home, not in the luxurious mansion, not in the elite life, but in the arms of the man she had learned to love against all odds. 6 months. Later, they renewed their vows in a small intimate ceremony, with Sarah as maid of honor and Nathan as best man. There were no society photographers, no hundreds of important guests, nothing but the people who really mattered. During the party, Victoria approached Emily. Thank you, she said. Simply. For what? For giving my son back to me. He truly smiles now. Emily looked at Alexander, who was animatedly discussing a book with Sarah that they had read together. He was relaxed, happy, genuinely present in the moment. He gave me back to myself too, Emily replied. As the night progressed and the guests danced in the garden illuminated by fairy lights, Emily reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. She had begun as a lonely librarian with an impossible proposal, and now she was a loved woman, part of a family, with a sister in recovery and a future full of possibilities. Alexander approached and pulled her to dance. What are you thinking? About, he asked. About how strange life is. A year ago, if someone had told me I would be here, married to you, I would have laughed. And if someone had told me I would fall hopelessly in love with a librarian who would make me question everything I thought I knew about myself, I would have told that person to get a psychiatric evaluation. Emily laughed. And now I know that the best things in life are the ones we don't plan. They danced in silence for a few moments, lost in the music and in each other. Alexander, Emily finally said, tonight you are mine. Alexander smiled, remembering the words he had said months before, when he was still a stranger trying to convince her to participate in a charade. No, he answered, kissing her softly. Tonight and all others, not by obligation, but by choice, forever. And as the stars shone over the garden and the music continued playing, Emily knew she had found something no contract